Good afternoon. Today I will be talking to you all about bridging the gap, kingdom-focused learning after high school. 70% of young adults drop out of the church. It's a pretty staggering statistic. This isn't talking about students who decide that they don't follow Jesus anymore or that they hate religion. These are students that graduate from our high schools, from our youth groups, and decide they want nothing to do with a church anymore because of maybe something that's happened. They have a ton of different reasons, but that's the statistic that's presented by Lifeway Research. And a quote by Christianity Today talks about that we need to recognize that it takes a church to raise a committed young adult. It involves all of us in the discipleship process. And this is where student pastors, volunteers, you all become important in investing in teenagers' lives. So I would argue that we have a great responsibility to respond to this statistic, to these students who are leaving the church and are ill-equipped to continue beyond high school. We have a responsibility as the older generation, and I have a couple references that talk about this in Titus, talking about older women to teach what is good to younger women, and then in 1 Peter, talking about the elders of the flock needing to be examples, and that those who are younger need to be subject to the elders. And I would also argue that we have a responsibility to them as fellow brothers and sisters in Christ. A common verse, Proverbs 27:17, iron sharpening iron. Just like we can encourage them, they can encourage us, and we need to see that potential in them. And then also Galatians 6:2, which talks about bearing with one another. This whole idea is we are doing life with them. We cannot look at these high school students and just let them go by and say it's all their fault. We do have responsibility. So I'm going to offer you today a solution. And I would argue a solution is a gap year program. I know for some of you, you may have never heard of a gap year program before, and that is okay. It is relatively new to the United States. It actually started over in Europe. It's actually very popular with Europeans. So this is a year after high school. Students, they don't take a break from school, or it's not an off year. It's usually just more focused on maybe different things than a normal school would be. So a gap year program is beneficial because of opportunities that are given as well as the outcomes. Some of the opportunities that are given for all gap years, there's a lot of different kinds, ranging all the way from one that's focused on music, all the way to one that's focused on teaching English. They're just very, very different. But they all focus on some aspect of learning. And according to Kristen White, author of The Complete Guide to the Gap Year, she says that a gap year is more than just a trend. It is a movement in education that recognizes our global economy, our shrinking borders, and our need for public service. It is a response to our students' need for a year to find purpose in their lives, or their yearning to take a break from achievement for its own sake and awaken their love of learning again. And not only is this just learning about outside of oneself, it's actually also learning about who you are as a person. Joseph O'Shea, who's author of another book called Gap Year, says that students reported using the gap year as a way out of a bubble or sheltered life. Students often wanted to use their gap year to learn about themselves in a new way. And I found this to be very interesting, especially for us as a church. I think people often call a church a bubble or being sheltered. So this is an awesome opportunity for our students to get out there. Another aspect of a gap year is the idea of traveling. And different gap years, some of them are short term, some of them are long term, some of them are you travel to another country for 9 months, other ones are maybe just summer. Those are called gap year programs as well, even though they may be shorter. There's also outside influences in their lives. There may be speakers. These could be the people who are in charge of the gap year. It depends what gap year. There may be teachers who actually come in and teach. And we also, well, our PowerPoint's down. That is okay. We will keep going. We also have fellow students who can also speak into the students' lives as well. And they may have different experiences or different, we're going to have our technician come and fix this for us, different experiences that we speak in the fellow students' lives, which is a great opportunity as well. And then a quote also from Harvard University Admissions Council. I know some of you may be wondering, well, will my student be able to, thank you so much, will my student be able to get into the program or get into a college after the program, which is a huge question. But the Harvard University Admissions Council says that let us hope that more of the students will take some sort of time out before burnout becomes the hallmark of their generation. They're saying our students are becoming burnout, which is really interesting, and I don't know how much the church has to do with that, so I think we should definitely consider our part in this. But there's also some interesting outcomes of a gap year. Obviously, the most important one being change. Ultimately, we want these students' lives changed for the better. And I think one of my favorite quotes about gap year comes from a secular author, Dean of Admissions, Christoph Gutentag, and he's at Duke University, and he says in general he thinks gap years are a terrific idea. Most students who are admitted to schools like Duke could use a sabbatical, which would let them learn about the world from a different perspective. I love that he uses the word sabbatical, because this is what we preach in our churches, that we can take Sabbath. So how about a sabbatical for our students? I think it's awesome that he uses that term, because it's something that we use, but we don't often allow ourselves to think. Another outcome is new thoughts and ideas. We kind of already talked about this, depending on the different leaders or speakers that come. Different cultures and opinions are given. These cultures may not be other countries. They could be from the students themselves that they take the gap year with. And then a quote from Joe O'Shea, director of Florida State Office of Undergrad Research. He says that we often develop most when our understanding of others and the world around us are challenged, when we engage with people and ideas that are different. Despite this insight, we often prioritize comfort and self-segregate into groups of sameness. We tend to surround ourselves with people who think, talk, and look similar to us. That's often what our churches look like. So I think this is an awesome opportunity to encourage our students to get out of that and to get challenged by other people. And they also have growth in understanding and experiences. Like I said, most of these programs travel, most of these programs are involved in uncomfortable situations that students have never been in before. And I would argue it's even more important to encourage a Christ-centered gap year program for our students. And so I know some of you are like, well, what does this look like? Maybe you've never heard of this before. Well, it looks like there's devotions for our students. It's focused on a personal relationship with God. That's the main focus of these gap years, that are focused on Christ. They focus on evangelism. What is the gospel? How do we tell the gospel to other people? A lot of high school students maybe have never done that in their lives before. Maybe you haven't. And how can we encourage our high school students to do that? They also focus on service. How can we live a life that looks like Jesus? How can we live out this gospel that we're trying to tell to the world? And they're also focused on self-care, which may sound a little interesting, but I would argue that's important. Focus on healthy living habits, like working out, like eating healthy. How do you do that? And I know some of you are thinking, well, it sounds too good to be true. It doesn't exist, but it does. I would argue that we need to encourage our students to be involved in One Life. And this is a gap year program in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, on the campus of Lancaster Bible College. And I'm going to go over a couple things that may set One Life apart from these other gap year programs that you hear about. This is a very brief overview, as there's much to say about this program. One Life students do travel, both all short-term, both U.S. and internationally. They travel probably at least once a month. To some ways, that's 2 hours away from the campus. So they're in the vans a lot, and they meet a ton of people by doing this. And that kind of goes into our second point of learning. They hear so many different speakers. Each place they travel to, they have an opportunity to learn from a new speaker, or from new people. They stay with host families. They meet people that way. And these speakers are pastors, they're disciplers themselves. They are people in the business world. They're people who are experts in their field, which is awesome. And then they also are discipled by the people who are on staff at One Life, by each other even, which is a very neat opportunity. And they also are encouraged in leadership. Something really cool One Life does is students are all on committees within One Life. And there's like worship committee, media committee, health committee, and they're in charge of leading that committee and really deciding what activities One Life students are involved in. They're also in charge of making breakfast, which might seem weird, but they have an opportunity to learn how to cook for 30 people, and also how to budget a breakfast for 30 people every day for a week, which some of us probably couldn't do. And then finally, they learn practical life skills. They have relational wisdom, financial wisdom, health and fitness. They have classes on these things, as well as the fact that they have to actually do these things in real life. They are stuck in a van for hours at a time with other students. They have to figure out how to live in community. Karina Laura, a current student, said that One Life is an experience that helps you grow and helps you set a firm foundation before you go out into the real world. I feel more prepared to go to college than before I started here. It has taught me how to live in community. And that right there is why they should go. And I'll leave you with this quote by Derek Melleby, who is the director of academics and author of Make College Count. And he says, taking a gap year could provide a remarkable opportunity to think more deeply about the person God has created you to be and where He might be calling you to serve Him. In a generation that is walking away from the faith, a gap year program exists as an opportunity for kingdom impact, and that we as a church should engage our members to support and engage in.